parts of a radical. So this symbol is called a radical, or sometimes called a root. X will be a number, or it will be invisible. It's called the index. If it's a square root, you won't see a number here. If it's a cube root, you will see a 3 right there. A, whatever's underneath, is called the radicand. Roots, vocabulary, square root, one of two equal factors. A perfect square is the product of an integer and itself. So here we have 5 squared equals 25. 5 squared means 5 times 5, which is 25. 5 is the square root of 25. 25 is called a perfect square. Negative 5 squared also equals 25, because negative 5 times negative 5 gives us positive 25. So negative 5 is also a square root of 25. 25 has two square roots, 5 and negative 5. 25 is a perfect square. If x squared equals y, then x is the square root of y. The principal square root is only the positive square root. In the previous example, 5 is the principal square root, not negative 5. The radical sign, this is what it looks like. It's also known as a root. Vic number 1, square and square root are opposite operations, just like addition and subtraction are opposite, multiplication and division. Squaring and square rooting are also inverse operations. Find each square root. Example 1, the square root of 64 is 8, because 8 squared equals 64. Now, you could also say that the square root of 64 is negative 8, because negative 8 squared is 64. This is just the principal square root. Example number 2, plus or minus the square root of 1.21. Now, if you type in your calculator, square root of 1.21, you will get 1.1. The calculator only gives you the principal square root, but because it has the plus or minus out front, you want to include it in your answer. 1.1 squared is 1.21, and negative 1.1 squared is 1.21. You can try that on your calculator. Example number 3, the negative square root of the fraction 25 over 36. Now this looks really complicated, but it's so easy if you just split it up. Now, a fraction under a square root means the top under the square root and the bottom under the square root. So, the negative stays out front. Square root of 25 is 5. Square root of 36 is 6. So, keep the negative out front, and your answer is negative 5 over 6. Example number 4. Square root of negative 16. If you try to type this in your calculator, it's going to give you an error. You cannot have a negative sign under a square root. That's Vic number 2. It'll give you no real solution, and that's what you would write as your answer. Solving equations with radicals. Example number 5. T squared equals 169. Well, I have something squared, and I know that the inverse operation of squared is square root. So you take the square root of both sides, and it will cause this exponent of 2 and that radical sign to disappear, and you're just left with t. Now, when you take the square root of a number, you have to put plus or minus out front. So we know that from our list, the square root of 169 is 13. So I put plus or minus 13, which means t could be 13 or it could be negative 13. You can write your answer in either of these two forms. Some more vocabulary. Cube root, one of 3 equal factors. So square root is one of 2 equal factors. Cube root is one of 3 equal factors. A perfect cube is the result of raising an integer to the 3rd power. So here, 2 times 2 times 2 is the same thing as 2 to the 3rd power. Well, our result is 8. 2 to the 3rd power is 8. So 8 is a perfect cube. 2 is the cube root of 8. This is a cube root symbol. Remember at the beginning I showed you where the index was? If it's a cube root, the index is 3. If x to the 3rd power equals y, then x is the cube root of y. And this is just how you say it algebraically. Find each cube root. Example number 6. The cube root of 125 is 5 because 5 to the third power equals 125. 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. So the cube root is 5. Example number 7. The cube root of negative 27. Now you might be thinking, oh, this isn't possible. However, it is. It's okay to have a negative underneath a cube root, but not underneath a square root. So, negative 3 is the cube root of negative 27 because negative 3 raised to the third power is negative 27. Vic number 3, cube and cube root are opposite operations, just like we said square and square root are opposite operations. Example number 8, Dylan has a planter in the shape of a cube that holds 8 cubic feet of potting soil. Solve the equation 8 equals s to the third power to find the length s of the container. So we want to find out how long one side is, and it's in the shape of a cube. So 8 equals s to the third power. If I know this is raised to the third power and I just want to get s by itself, I do the opposite operation. Well, the opposite of cube is cube root. So you take the cube root of both sides. This cube root, that 3 and the radical, and this exponent of 3 disappear, and s is all that remains on the right side. The cube root of 8. You can do this on your calculator, and I'll show you how to in class. Or you know that 2 times 2 times 2 gives you 8. So 2 is the cube root of 8. Each side of the container is 2 feet long.